Well, we are now 14 months into the pandemic in what's hopefully the final stretch. But the constant ups and downs, who among us isn't wearing thin, right? It's easy to feel a sense of stagnation, of emptiness as the weeks and months go by. It's called languishing. Psychologist Adam Grant recently wrote about it in the New York Times. So we turned to Instagram to ask what languishing looks like for you. One person compared it to climbing a never-ending ladder. Another, like listening to a song on repeat. And here's one many of us can relate to: work, sleep, pay bills, repeat. So let's explore this and talk about how to break that cycle. Dr. Shimi Kang is a psychiatrist and author in Vancouver, and Dr. Rehman Abdulrehman is a clinical psychologist in Winnipeg. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Hello.
So Dr. Kang, how do you see what languishing is at its core and why so many of us are feeling it these days?
Yeah, so I'm going to just jump in and give what I think the science of that term means. So acute stress is like crisis. That's adrenaline. And that's when we go into freeze, fight, flight. We get anxious, irritable, we get distracted. And then long-term stress is cortisol. It's like this dullness. And think of an animal that's going into a cave. They're hiding. They don't have the vitality. And to me, that's languishing. I believe we've been there a long time, even pre-pandemic. The data on stress being the number one health epidemic has been there. And it is eroding our physical and mental health. And so I think languishing is a great word that we can all connect with and relate to. However, I think we were on that course even pre-pandemic, and it shined a lighter, brighter light on it.
Right. And I guess, Dr. Abdulrahman, it's important to note that this affects everyone in different ways, right? And one of the common themes that I saw in the comments that we got was how it affects people's motivation and their drive, this feeling that, our lives are almost just kind of chugging along at a low hum. If I could read a few of these comments to you. I'm losing interest in everything because every day looks the same. I can't seem to find a sound routine. I have extra time, but no motivation, so I do nothing. How do you approach this question of energy and drive?
The interesting thing is energy, drive, motivation are all tied to issues with mood. And typically when we think about depression or dysthymia, we're not always looking at just sadness. We are looking at the wearing away of that energy and motivation. Now, the way that we tend to approach that needs to be tied to what we call behavioral activation. The problem that during a pandemic is that all things we would typically do that would increase that behavior, like a routine to go to work, being outside, socializing, a variety of activity, all of that is taken away. And so the way to approach that ultimately is to, in a situation where we've never been before, we have to become the people we never were before. And we have to start to think outside the box to find ways to do things that give us that activity, that variety, but it won't be the way that we're used to doing it.
So give me an example. When you say thinking outside the box to do some of these things, what do you mean?
Well, I am not an outdoor winters person at all. And, this past winter, I found myself getting all the winter equipment I needed to make sure that I was outside playing with my son. So I had to become somebody I wasn't in order to make sure that I had the activity and that variety that I needed that would sustain a good sense of mental health and positive mood.
Dr. Kang, how do you see that fundamental problem of regaining or wrestling back control in your life?
Yes, I think it definitely is a problem because we have to redefine, and adaptability is the key to survival and thriving, and adaptability is the best fit with an ever-changing world. That's survival of the fittest. And so what we just heard is adaptation. We have to do things differently. And this science, though, is in all of us. We can all do it. The example you just heard is nature actually gives us motivation. We're meant to be outside. Connecting with loved ones gives us oxytocin. Trying new things in terms of recreation, it's that word recreate, that gives us serotonin. These are powerful mood enhancers, brain optimizers. We can do all of these activities on our own. And even through the pandemic, it's simple but not easy, is what I say. But if we really understand the science, sometimes there's a bit of numbness to the same conversation, routine, regular sleep, get outside. But these are vital and they are simple but not easy, but they lead to wellness and vitality, which is what we're talking about.
And Dr. Kang, is there a clear point at which a person should kind of look inward and say, you know what, maybe this is more than just a case of the blahs, right? That I'm just feeling like in this slump, and that maybe I should think of my mental health and this idea of actually maybe I'm unwell right now.
Yeah, so we would define, when we cross over to a medical disorder of depression, really where it is now impacting your functioning. So, you have this feeling of languishing, let's say, but you really are having a time being productive, whether it is getting your work done, taking care of your kids, taking care of yourself. And I do want to mention burnout, because burnout is in between depression and closer to languishing. I would say burnout is now recognized by the World Health Organization as a syndrome. And I think we were headed to a lot of burnout before pandemic, and of course we're feeling it now. I like that word a bit better because I feel it's a bit more actionable.
So Dr. Abdulrehman, maybe I'll give you the last word here. Just in terms of, you mentioned some coping strategies, but what ought a person to do, I don't know, maybe starting tonight or tomorrow morning to feel like they're getting back on the right track, back to some sense of normalcy?
Well, our emotions are tied to both our cognitions, or our thinking, and our behavior. So look at your behavior. See what's changed, from pre-pandemic. Replicate the things that you need to do in a different way that gives you that activity and that variety as much as possible. Perspective also is critically important as well, too. And the pandemic has kind of taken that away. We've got a moving target of our light at the end of the tunnel. So we have to work with ourselves and have conversations with people that allow us to shift in how we look at things. And that shift in the way that we look at things can offer that little bit of control that we often need. It's the holding of a corner of a page instead of palming the entire page. And that little bit of control, that little bit of perception shift can allow us to turn page by page until we finish a book.
One page at a time. I like that. Doctors, thank you so much for your time. Helpful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.